Non. Ok. Top.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thank you for watching. This is a new show on Radio Judaica in Brussels. I'm glad to start this new show, which is supposed to be happening on a weekly basis. I have my first guest with me here, Jeremy Saltan. But first of all, I want to thank Maurice Blibaum and Olivier Sokolsky for making this possible. They came up with the initiative and made this happen, so a big thank you to them. Jeremy Saltan, you are my first guest on this show. I'm going to introduce you. You are the Director of English Operation in Yamina, right-wing party in Israel, Nationalistic Party, and a brilliant political strategist and analyst. I've been following you for years now, and you have come up with insights, great insights, and open doors to new kinds of debates. And so I'm really glad and honored that you are here with me on this show. Thank you for that. Jeremy.
Thank you. If I can just say, first of all, congratulations on your first show.
Thank you. Thank you. Jeremy, I want this show to be about the annexation plan, or in our language, a sovereignty plan. But I would like you to first tell us a few things about what concerns us all and every person on this planet, COVID-19, and what is happening right now in Israel, actually, because it is quite worrisome. And also from the perspective of Yamina, because right now Yamina is not in the government, and Naftali Bennett has been really vocal about measures that should be taken against Corona and how things should be handled in the previous government. But right now, from the opposition, he's really vocal as well. How do you see things? What exactly should the government do according to Yamina and according to Naftali Bennett? And is the government actually listening a bit to what Bennett is proposing?
So I think most people know that during the first wave, Israel was really a leader when it came to combating and dealing with the coronavirus. A lot of countries looked at what Israel did and they copied it. Of course, Naftali Bennett, the leader of my party, was the defense minister at the time. And a lot of very important concepts started here first, such as making sure that the elderly, the senior citizens, would be the ones that are kept the furthest away from areas of risk. Of course, other people with pre-existing conditions. He had, of course, the idea to take people infected with the coronavirus and put them in separate corona hotels. And that way it prevented family members from also coming down with the virus. So there was a lot of good things that he was able to do, but the country was also in the right place, and a lot of people learned from that. Now, you fast forward, we're having in Israel what we're calling a second wave. This is, of course, something that has happened in certain countries and others it has not. There is, of course, criticism whether the way back to normalcy, sort of the lifting of a lot of the limitations and restrictions that we had here in Israel, whether that was done too fast or not. But I'll put that on the side, since that's a question in itself, and talk about what it is that we think needs to be done with the current situation. The number one thing that needs to be done is there needs to be a person who's in charge of it. As I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, we're in this weird government that has 30-something ministers. That's larger than, I believe, the great majority of governments in Europe, including a lot of the ones with populations many times the size of Israel. However, there's no corona minister. And there's not any specific person that's in charge of dealing with it. You have various responsibilities there with the health ministry. You have various responsibilities with the prime minister. You have other ministries who are making other important decisions, whether it's the tourism minister, whether it's the transportation minister, whether it's the education minister, since we did have a way back when it came to sending the kids to school and now camps. And what we think is you have to have one person in charge of it. And then briefly, a second thing is the aspect of having more tests every day. The only way that you know whether someone has corona or not is to go ahead and increase the number of tests so that people don't need to wait a week. And during that week, of course, the amount of people that they possibly infected won't even know, and so on and so forth. So you need to have someone who's in charge of the situation. And secondly, you have to be able to increase the number of tests so that you're able to remove the people from society and prevent them from spreading it further.
Yes, I understand. Jeremy, thank you for this. I would like to move on to the subject, the annexation subject, because it's been quite on the agenda everywhere, and also in media, of course, and quite a lot of countries have spoken out against it. Now, I want to talk about the European reaction, because we have seen quite a harsh language coming from Europe and the EU, and also specifically some member states as well. So we have seen statements like Joseph Borrell, who is the chief high representative of foreign affairs of the European Union, saying that annexation would not pass unchallenged. And he talked about taking punitive steps against Israel. Of course, I mean, we know that the EU is challenged by the fact that they need to have 27 countries on board, a consensus, in order to move on and go ahead with their punitive steps or whatever they want to put on the agenda. But my question to you would be, because I have seen little to very poor reaction coming from the Israeli side. Is Israel not interested in seeing how to try to uphold the relations with European Union and try to really maintain the relations? Because I see that from Israel, there is not a lot of reaction. We have seen the new foreign minister Ashkenazi reacting to Borrell after he issued a statement congratulating the new government, and in the same message, actually warning against annexation, in which Ashkenazi has responded that this is megaphone diplomacy and so on. What do you think, and how is Israel? Is there a debate in Israel about this?
So I think one of the things that maybe doesn't come across enough when I'm listening to particularly the European media, and of course you guys in Europe, you're consuming the media over where you live, is that Israel's diplomatic standing is at the best point that it's ever been since its establishment. We're in a situation where we have unofficial relations, but relations with a great number of Arab and Muslim countries that we did not have before. And we also have relations growing with many other areas which historically have not necessarily been on Israel's side, within Latin and Hispanic America, as well as also within Africa. And when it comes to the European Union itself, a lot of the Eastern European, and I know there are a lot of countries that prefer to view themselves as Central European countries, a lot of them have really become very, very solidly pro-Israel. And of course, in Western Europe, there's a lot of controversy because of particular statements or even actions that some of these leaders have either said or some of their supporters have been involved with. But the standing of Israel is very, very good. It's, again, the best, I believe, that Israel has ever been in. So when we hear these things coming from Europe, when you're in Israel and you're hearing this, the context is that Israel's very strong. And even though there are repercussions that are being talked about by Joseph Borrell, there's no talk here of sanctions. there's what some people expect to be a souring of a relationship with some of the countries within Europe. But let's look also just at, pan-European, not just at the European Union. The UK is not talking about these type of measures. Norway's not, Switzerland, right? If we go out of the EU, we see sort of that there's the organization itself that, of course, is driving a certain agenda. But there are a lot of member states and, of course, European countries outside of the EU that aren't going in that direction. So it's not to say that there won't be issues with France or Luxembourg or potentially other countries such as Ireland or Sweden. But what we're seeing here in Israel is that a lot of what we're witnessing coming from specific countries and specific organizations, not just the EU, but other international organizations as well, is that what it comes down to is that nothing here is going to be a significant move that needs to have Israelis worried.
Yes, I understand very well. And actually, this whole rhetorics that are coming from the European Union actually makes believe that somehow Israel is a beneficiary of EU funds. Israel, after all, is a partner, is an equal partner, has a trade agreement with Europe. In a way, sanctioning would mean sanctioning oneself. I mean, this is a cooperation between both sides. And so it gives the impression that Israel would suffer tremendously if Europe would take some steps or punitive steps as they talk against Israel. So I agree with you on that.
Just to hit on that point a little bit more, because I think this is an important one. There are a lot of markets that really the Israeli market cornered. If you're in Europe and you're having a date or a fig, just to give you some examples, those of course are almost all exclusively from Judea and Samaria, or as the Palestinians would call the western bank of the Jordan River. About at this point, over 85% of the European market comes from Israel, and again, mostly from the settlements. So going ahead and deciding to boycott or sanction Israel, there will be a lot of, how can I call it? The impact on Europeans will be probably more what I would call unbearable than the Israelis, who of course are selling to other people besides Europe. Europe is the number one trade partner, and we have great relations, as you said. And of course, you're going to have disagreements among friends, but the threats to go ahead and do something which seems to be an equivalent to a lot of Israelis as shooting yourself in the foot is not something that really makes a lot of Israelis feel like they need to be under pressure.
Yes, that's right. That's right, Jeremy. I agree with you on that. About the plan itself, actually, I've been wondering because, there was a lot of talk about going ahead with that plan. And right now, it seems like it is on hold. The question is, why is it on hold? Is it about COVID? Is it because the government is very complicated? Is there a disagreement? Or is the world's pressure maybe resonating in a way? What is exactly the issue? Why is it not going ahead?
Well, the main issue is that Benny Gantz, who's of course the leader of the Blue and White Party, he's what we call here in Israel the alternate prime minister. He's the person who's supposed to replace Netanyahu as the next prime minister as part of a national unity government that the two of them signed. So Benny Gantz wrote in the coalition agreement that formed this new government, which of course sent my party outside of the government. And of course, Benny Gantz took over Naftali Bennett's position as defense minister of the state of Israel. So what he wrote in that agreement was that July 1st would be the first date in which this could be discussed and voted upon. But if you look back, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, never talked about July 1st as a date. If you look at Donald Trump, as well as all of the people on the American side working on it, whether it's Trump or whether it's Jason or Jared or David or Avi, everyone working on this plan very clearly stayed away from having an actual framework of a timeline. So a lot of people picked up on that coalition agreement and everyone focused and zeroed in on July 1st, and then nothing happened. However, what I can tell you is, speaking with Americans and Israeli officials, this is not off the table. Again, if this was off the table, first of all, people who criticize the plan would go out and have a victory lap. There's a reason why they're not doing that. It's because it is very real, and what they have now understood is that perhaps listening too much to Gantz and Ashkenazi, Ashkenazi is the foreign minister and the senior partner of Benny Gantz within his party, that it's really not helping them, because the ones who are making the actual decisions here are the Americans on one side, and on the Israeli side, it's Benjamin Netanyahu, and you have various settler leaders who are involved, and other people within the right. So it's a little bit unusual, since most people who deal with the Israeli government are used to having a defense minister like Bennett was, or a foreign minister, that are very much involved on the most intimate details. But that's not really the case in this government.
But that's actually also a question here. It is a bit peculiar to have this plan going ahead with Yamina in the opposition. I mean, Yamina was the one, also the new right, of course, but was the one to put this on the agenda in the first place, and now it will maybe go ahead without Yamina. How do you see this happening? Is this something that is going to happen? Is this something that you think can happen without Yamina in the government?
I need to address the irony of the situation that you're mentioning. It was Naftali Bennett who wrote the plan in 2012 to apply Israeli sovereignty, again, not over the entire area of Judea and Samaria, but specifically in Area C. And the Trump plan here is talking about 50% of Area C itself, which is 30% of the entire territory. So what you see here is the Americans and Prime Minister Netanyahu adopting a plan that Naftali Bennett wrote 8 years ago. He literally wrote the book on that, as they say. And here it is where Netanyahu has sort of left him outside of the government by his choice to try to go ahead and then take the credit politically for what is happening. Now, politics is a very, very complicated arena, and you're going to have a lot of things that happen that are very hard to explain. But this one seems pretty simple. If this vote does come to the Knesset, since again, this was our idea, we're certainly going to vote for it, even if Netanyahu is the one that goes ahead and reaps the political benefit from this. However, there is this situation where he might try to allow various elements to influence him and potentially go ahead and move away from this. And that's interesting because, Netanyahu really puts himself in a hole here. If he doesn't move forward with what it is that he said that he would, so Bennett most likely will be very easily able to pick up a lot of the popularity in voters that are today parked within the Likud. Let's remember that before Netanyahu embraced our platform and our policies, they were not doing so well in the polls, and we were doing very well. After going ahead and adopting our policies when it comes to, of course, this, other diplomatic, national defense, and also judicial reform issues, they went ahead and gave Netanyahu the best achievement he's ever had. He's been the leader of the Likud in 9 elections, and this was resounding the best victory that he's had in terms of seats since he started leading the Likud in 96, of course, with the break in the middle.
Yes, of course. And tell me, do you think, how far is actually the American support for this plan, but without really taking the whole plan in its entirety, right? Because going ahead with sovereignty is not exactly what the plan is all about. This is part of a bigger picture. So,
I understand what you're saying. There's the aspect that this plan is supposed to create a Palestinian state, but there are certain issues that we just need to address that have to do with the overall picture. Let's remember the Palestinians are not talking to the Americans. They are refusing to come to the table.
Yes.
In fact, I believe that if Mahmoud Abbas made a decision that he did want to engage with the Americans and he would renew talks, I do think that he would ask Netanyahu to go ahead and to stop and not move forward. But the situation that we're in now is that Israel is responding to Palestinian unilateral moves. I do a lot of these interviews, and all the time people are asking me, why is Israel starting with unilateral moves? Wait, when the Palestinians went to the ICC, that wasn't a unilateral move? When the
Exactly.
Palestinians decided to join UN bodies, that wasn't a violation of the Oslo Accords, that wasn't a unilateral move. There are just so many moves the Palestinians have taken. And since the Americans are engaged in this process and they do want to bring about peace, they understand the Israelis who are saying, listen, all we're doing is giving, and we're not getting anything. So what the Americans are saying is, listen, the Palestinians need to understand there is a price for not coming to the table. There is a price for saying no. And that's why they're giving the green light on this. Mahmoud Abbas, with one phone call, can end this, but he's choosing not to, which also goes ahead and raises the question whether his end game and the strategy is meant really to create a Palestinian state, or if all of this has been a bluff.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time the Palestinians say no. They have said no all the time, right? So they are going to say no again, so it wouldn't surprise us, right?
Yeah, I just want to, just 2 sentences on that point. Let's remember, the Israelis never said no. Go back to the Peel Commission in the 30s, the UN partition plan, the various attempts, from the UN in the early days, the time in which the Jordanians were in control of that land, move forward to the Madrid conference, and the aftermath of that, Oslo, Oslo II, Camp David, Taba, Annapolis, the John Kerry shuttle talks. Each time the Israelis said yes. Each time the Palestinians could have had a state. It would have been maybe on 100%, 98%, 90%, 95%. But in the end, each time the Palestinians said no, and it was the Israelis who said yes. So this shouldn't surprise us that they're saying no. The difference here is that they won't even come to the table before saying no. And this is already a level that really, really, really bothers the Americans. And like they said, they feel that there needs to be some sort of action that is done to show the Palestinians there are consequences. You actually have to pay for this if you're going to decide to continue in this stalemate that we've been in for, at this point, over a century.
That's right. Jeremy, I'm going to ask you a last question, and because you had said before that Yamina is going to support a sovereignty plan if introduced by this government, but is there a version, a version of which Yamina could imagine not to support? It doesn't mean that Yamina is ready to go on any plan, right?
Look, obviously, you want to read something before you vote on it. Anyone who's ever told you how they're going to vote before actually reading the piece of legislation they're going to vote on is probably, you probably shouldn't take that check to the bank, as they say, because you're not going to be able to cash it. What I can tell you is that thanks to a piece of legislation that I had the honor to work on called Basic Law National Referendum, we gave constitutional status to having a referendum if we would have to go ahead and give up any Israeli land. This was passed back in 2014. And that prevents the linkage of applying Israeli sovereignty to the idea of the establishment of a Palestinian state. So what you're trying to sort of allude to, what I'm telling you is that practically it is impossible to do that. At least you can't do that in a Knesset vote.
Yeah.
So I believe that it would be very, very, very difficult to write some sort of draft that we would not vote on. But at the same time, I can't promise you how we're going to vote when there's no piece of legislation in front of us.
Thank you, Jeremy. We're going to finish here. I was very glad to have you as my first guest again. Thank you for everyone watching. This is going to be aired on 90.2 on Judaica in Brussels. And so Hopefully people will listen in, and we will communicate the later dates later on. So thanks again, everyone, and thank you, Jeremy, and have a good night.